This is a 1993 Fiat Tempra 1.9 SX SW. Basically, from 1990 to 1996, this was Fiat's mid-size entry into the estate market in Europe. And you're looking at one of only 4 left taxed on the UK's roads. And that is out of 30 taxed Tempras on the UK roads. Known internally as the Type 159 platform, although it doesn't really bear much resemblance to the later Alpha 159, which is a bit more James Bond villanesque than this. It shares its underpinnings with the Lancia Dedra and the Alpha 155, although all of them do share a commonality with the Fiat Tipo on which this is basically based. The Tipo being European Car of the Year in 1988, so it was a good place to start really. Now, the 4-door saloon is way more common than the estate version like this. Looking at the two side by side in photos now, you can see how bodily it's kind of the same up to this shut line, where the doors and the shut line of the door into the wing appears to be the same. However, on the estate version, there's a lot more metal behind that back door, and this roof is something I've never seen before. As well as the factory fit sunroof, which looks slightly incongruous. All the curves and round bits just look a bit out of place with the very, very edgy and angular Tempra style. This roof actually rises up a bit like a Citroen DS Safari perhaps. But bizarrely, looking on this roof, there's a channel. As the roof rises at the back, it sinks in down below here, and the idea is it channels rainwater into the spoiler and away from the rear window. Something quite novel and unusual I've never seen before. Externally, the styling is very much standard 90s evolution of 80s styling with lots of angles, lots of corners. Unlike the Punto which followed, which is all neat lines and smooth curves, this is very much angular and old school. These big square headlights roll into these big corner indicator clusters. And it all comes down to this very traditional flat nose and big bumper. It does come with fog lights though, as it's quite a high-spec car, and this Shiraz red metallic looks very fetching on this shape. Climbing in, these handles are a little bit unusual because you put your hand in, it feels like they're a pull type handle, but they're not, they're a button type. So you have to pull and push in a slightly unusual way. This interior is very interesting. This interesting dog's tooth pattern on the velour is known as grey red velvet apparently, although it seems to be green and red on the grey, so I don't know why. It's an interesting mix of old and new. These seats, which are deeply foamed, nice and soft to sit in, look kind of old school traditional, but the dashboard is just frankly mental. It's a twin deck digital God knows what. Someone was definitely watching too much sci-fi at the time. If you think a Corvette C4's dashboard is way out, you need to look at this. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it. Down the bottom, it is pure Tipo. I think this is actually the same moulding as goes into my Alpha 145. The mirror adjuster is in the same place, but the gear shift position looks virtually identical. And the seating position feels almost the same as well. This is upholstered slightly more nicely than the Alpha is, with lots of sort of nice bits of felt in the little kind of coin and cubby holes, but everything else looks virtually the same apart from the truly insane dashboard. Even the glove box looks incredibly similar. Looking across this dashboard, on the top deck, fairly traditional start, we've got a digital clock. Then we have a turbo boost gauge because this is a 1929cc turbo boosted diesel. Then we have a black area. Then we have the odometer showing 120,000 miles on this car, although apparently it had a dashboard change at some point, so it's only actually got about 80,000, hence the incredible condition. Then we have the actual speed itself, 0 miles an hour at the moment, or you can switch this at the push of a button into MPH into KPH. So if you're changing countries, going from UK to Europe on the Eurostar or the ferry, hit the button and you're there. Or if you feel like freaking out your passengers that you're actually doing 60 through a town centre, which I given to understand the current owner of this car does occasionally do, you can also do that as well. Then you've got your digital readouts for fuel and engine temperature. And then moving on to the deck below, because this is separated by deep plastic. This has got to be, what, it's like a full finger length, that's like what, 10 centimetres or something. Deep recess between things. I guess that's to keep sun glare off so they don't have to worry about the lights not being bright enough to be visible. You've got your electronic check panel, which is like an above view of the car, showing doors open and closed with little red lights by each one, and the boot. Warnings for lights, tail lights, side lights if they're malfunctioning at all. Then you have another plain area, which I guess is for more warning lights. Well, it makes me nothing at all. I can't really tell because it's starting to delaminate slightly and I can't quite see. Time will tell during the test drive. Then we have our actual regular check area light, which is fairly normal considering its surroundings. It's with regular lights behind it. It just looks like the standard panel from a regular instrument binnacle. And finally, you've got your RPM, your tachometer, and in the form of a electronic readout gauge. I'll get some footage of that for you when we're on the move. The steering wheel is like a rubbery plastic effort. No airbag, it does have a nice horn in it. Easily findable hazard warning light here in the top. And these stalks with the indicators and wipers are identical. They are exactly the same parts bin item as in my Alpha 145, which, well, the 145 ran from the early 90s to 2000. I think it was 2000 because mine is one of the very last years they produced it before the 147 came out. With 50,000 miles less on the clock, these are in notably better condition. And down here we've got our standard fan temperature distribution, same as on any other car. Same as the air conditioning because it's above 30 degrees today. If I look like I'm sweating or I'm slightly drunk, it's because it's about 30 degrees and I cannot cope with that. Below that with a big full width ashtray / litter tray. And finally below that, we've got our original fit Grundig radio cassette, shouting the word safe on the screen for some reason. I don't know if it's like street talk or it's safe because it's got a code, or it's actually a secret safe and it's got lots of money hidden in there. And then we have a beautiful condition 5-speed gear knob with reverse, obviously. But this is black, heavy molded plastic, but it is unmarked and perfect with a leatherette gaiter. This all looks brand new. I'm honestly amazed how well this has survived because this is in constant contact. Manual car, it is one of the most frequently used controls in the car. So, wow, that's lasted well. Coin holder because coin holder, and some little gubbins holders. I would imagine there should be some kind of gaiter around this because I can see into the internal workings. There's nothing there. However, these cars are ridiculously rare in this country, and finding that kind of trim piece will be impossible. So if that is missing, it's not going to come up soon. Now this car is relatively well equipped. We've got an electric tilt slide sunroof up here, and we've got front electric windows, which is very nice. And I might even open that one because, my word, it's warm. Big door bins here, and a couple of nice little pockets. The pistol pocket here, little, I don't know, it's kind of an awkward shape for putting much stuff in because it will basically just, you know, fall out. The lower one will put a pair of glasses quite happily, the upper one, I'm not quite sure what size it's for because it's perfectly positioned to let stuff drop on the floor. Big glove box, as I said, and a tea shelf. And this tea shelf is slightly delaminating, so there's only room for 2 small cups there if you've got a friend, or 1 big cup on your own. Important tea shelf action. You're going to get some interesting stereo quality sound here because we have stereo speakers in the dash top, but one on the driver's side is firing up into the windscreen, the other one's firing at an angle into the passenger compartment, which will do very strange things to the stereo effect. These electric windows are one touch down and up on the driver's side, only keep fit in the back though. Now backseat passengers weren't too badly off either. It's a bit tight getting in there as the angle of the roof and the door make it a little bit tight, and you might bang your nose if you're not too careful. But once you're in here, very, very deeply upholstered seats. Well, I say upholstered, foamed, I'm going to say, because it feels like I'm squishing into a big foamy squishiness, which is rather nice. I think it'll be quite comfortable on a long journey. Although it's got 3 seat belts, you do have this enormous rear armrest to separate you and your squabbling sibling if you're in the back with an angry brother or sister. Also, I forgot to mention there is a nice fold-down armrest for the front seat people as well. Legroom and kneeroom isn't bad in here, and headroom, being in States, it keeps on going back and up, is commendable, I would say. And also, you've got a nice air vent as well, so that's not that common on a mid-range 90s car to have an air vent for the back passengers. So well done Fiat for that, that's very nice. As I said, keep fit windows, but big litter tray / ashtray in the door. Another courtesy light in the back, which is a nice touch, and there's one over the boot as well. So triple courtesy lights going on there, which is excellent. And of course headrest in the back, which wasn't always common in the 90s. Let's have a look in the boot. Now the Tempra SW does have one rather neat tail trick guaranteed to annoy any snobby Range Rover owners you turn up next to. Apart from its very, very heavy struts, it has a split tailgate. So loading large items is a doddle, and if you turn up at your chosen field sport, hunting, shooting, fishing, dogs, horses, you name it, you can have a picnic on the back. And this is a very heavy duty bit of engineering here. There's a large bodywork panel with enormous hinges that you can sort of make out through the gap. So apart from being perfect height for sitting and having a nice cup of tea, it's also very comfortable indeed. A little low on the headline though. Don't think Top Gear will be taking any of these on for filming duties too soon. Apart from there's only 4 of them, of course. The boot itself, apart from being great for sitting in, is pretty big. There's a 60-40 split back seat as well. A huge area under here, which I initially thought, oh no, there's no spare wheel. Turns out I'm wrong, the spare wheel's behind there. That's just your jack and your lock kit, and a whole bunch of space for, you know, little used thing, emergency vests, I don't know what. I don't know what the previous owner was planning on doing with this particular car, but they were prepared for anything, including snake bite unit. Wow, you get to interesting places in a Tempra SW. If you've got stuff you need to hide away for security, you can tuck it all under here, no problem. I've just given the game away, haven't I? Sorry. There are even a couple of little nice, neat, handy hooks on the underside of here, which let you clip it onto hangers on the side, so that you can look in here without the thing falling on you. That's really thoughtful. Now, it is an old school diesel, so it takes a bit of a crank on the key sometimes to get itself warmed up. But it is that kind of old school smoky diesel that starts with a cloud of black goo, but then just soldiers on forever. You could probably run it on cooking oil, anything else that comes to hand, old paint, paraffin. After the zombie apocalypse, this is the kind of car you need, because it'll run on anything, and once it's cranked and running, it'll keep on going indefinitely. Power steering on this model. It's fairly nicely weighted. Feels kind of good. Got a bit of resistance and feedback. And with not many miles on the clock, it all feels just absolutely tight as anything. It's a one owner car from new. The current owner is a collector who is the car's second owner. And so it's in good hands and being well looked after. Now, the Tempra was revealed in 1989 and launched in 1990, and the SW version was revealed another 2 months later to an unsuspecting public. Initially there was a 1.4 and 1.6 litre engine, petrol engine variants only, which soon grew to a 1.8 and a 2 litre petrol, as well as this 1.9 turbo diesel. There was also a non-turbo, very sluggish diesel option as well. You don't want that. I think it had like 80 horsepower or so. As well as this 5-speed manual, other transmission options, which didn't all come to the UK, were a selector automatic and a 4-wheel drive system with the manual, which I think might have been Europe only. But it's one of those crazy things, like you can get the Alpha 33 estate as a 4-wheel drive, which is a wonderful thing, but I don't think there are any left in the UK. There may be only 2 or 3. I'm not sure of any on the road. But if there are, I would absolutely love one. It's one of my real kind of bucket list vehicles. 4-wheel drive Alpha 33 estate, Series 3 in red, cloverleaf. I'm still looking, one day maybe. This is a car that's happy to tootle along quite rapidly. We're doing sort of 50-60 down a country lane, which is the national limit on a country lane. The car turns in really tightly, grips beautifully, and just goes. It's front wheel drive obviously, and you can feel the power pulling through the front wheels. It doesn't really torque steer, there's not enough oomph to do that. Wow, that's a big tractor. Ouch, I'm bitten on the back of the head. Ouch. Now, like the Rover 400, this is one of those cars that was pitched at a size segment that didn't quite exist. So although in terms of physical size, it's really more akin to a Peugeot 306 or a Mark 5 or 6 Escort estate, Fiat were really pitching it against things like the Cavalier and Sierra estate. Although in 1993 the Mondeo replaced the Sierra, that was a whole step up again in terms of size on what the Sierra had been, which pushed this more into its own smaller segment. That said though, the interior space on this thing is enormous because it is so angular and square inside here. Your space goes right into the corners. The problem with like a curvier design is that you lose space into those nice interesting shapes. This, you go right to the edge. feel vibrations and knocks. That's my own camera gear rattling rather than actual bits of the car mostly. Apart from the fan does make a bit of a weird groany sound. Now this 1929cc, or as it says in the book 1930cc, or as everyone else calls it, 2 litre turbocharged diesel, is good for 92 horsepower. And on steeper hills it feels like a little bit less, but once you're on the open road and the turbo is actually kicking in, it feels like it could be a little bit more, because it's very willing to pull through the back twisty roads. The chassis is more than happy to play with, well, more the torque than the BHP. And although I'm not on a dual carriageway at the moment, and there isn't one easily accessible for this road test, the owner does tell me it will cruise really happily at 70 or even more if you're on the Autobahn, with 3 or 4 people and loads of luggage. It just doesn't feel the extra load in the car. According to the Fiat, it's good for 112 miles an hour and a 0 to 60 in 12.1 seconds. I'll be honest, I'm not going to try and prove either of those things. But at middling speeds on a back road, it's awfully entertaining. The brake and clutch are incredibly light under your feet, but the accelerator is typical Italian footrest kind of thing going on. It's slightly up and to the right and really firm. So you have to put a lot more effort into making this car go than you do into making it stop. Feel free to pull me up on this if I'm wrong, because I probably am. But I got a feeling it's got the same gearbox as my Alfa 145. In fact, everything in the Tipo Dedra 155, which uses a 5-speed manual, I think will be using the same gearbox. And it's not a bad unit either. It's quite slick, it's a little bit sort of stiff into gear to gear, but that's like a nice resistance rather than a crunchy, graunchy resistance. It's a pleasant thing to use really, and this big rubber gear knob thing is just the right size to sort of clasp in your hand, so that's also a good thing. Now, unlike the Punto which I drove the other day, this does have electrically adjustable mirrors. Oh my word, there's a Puma! I love a Puma. Must get one of those on the channel soon. No, decent turn of speed when you want it to. I mean, 0 to 30 is quite impressive. This really is a very easy car to drive. And these seats, the longer you spend in it, the more you appreciate how supportive they are and how comfortable they are. You can sort of see where they were coming from, because it does feel a little bit more substantial than a 306 or an Escort, but honestly I think it also feels a lot smaller than a Cavalier. With its 14-inch alloys and sort of fairly deep cross-section tyres, it's quite a soft ride, but it is designed as a comfortable load-hauling family car rather than a sports wagon. Although it has sport wagon in the name, the SW bit tends to allude to sport wagon in Italian cars, and Jaguars as well. It doesn't take long for this mad dashboard to suddenly become quite normal. The speed readout is really easy. I'll be honest, in my modern W204 Mercedes, I tend to use the digital readout quite a lot anyway, especially with all the average speed checks and things going along. So it's actually quite handy, and that MPH KPH thing is absolute genius. It's a bit strange having the turbo gauge so far over there on the left. It's completely out of your eye line, and you basically forget it almost as soon as the novelty's worn off that you've got a turbo gauge, which is digital like in kit. Because you can just spend a lot of time just dropping a gear and making noises. Although this is absolutely nothing like a Pontiac Trans Am in any way, shape or form. As a practical retro, this is absolutely awesome because it's got the enormous boot space, so you can load up tons of gear and go on holiday, go to IKEA, do tip runs, you name it, it'll take it. Go days out and have picnics in the back. It's got room for 5 people in pretty good comfort. It's comfortable for a long journey. It's got a decent radio, and it's enormously frugal as well. owner tells me he gets kind of mid-40s MPG, 46, 47, which is comparable with a modern 2-litre diesel, so no compromise there either. I really like this. This is one of those cars that you could see in the street and not even notice, but if you are into retros and you know what you're looking for, you would just be like jaw on the floor just knowing how rare this thing is. And it's hard to put a value on a car like this as well, because what are you going to compare it to? There are 3 others on the road which may come up for sale. Ask what you want to ask, and if someone wants to pay it, then they'll pay it. This is a really interesting car actually. It's a bit of a mix of parts bin special with futuristic madness going on. I do love a bit of futuristic madness. It makes things more entertaining. Well, thank you for watching this latest episode of Driving Around in Cars No One Else Remembers. I've certainly had fun driving this Tempra. I've never driven a Tempra before. I've been in plenty of other TPO based vehicles, but never a Tempra, so this has been quite an adventure.